Yesterday, our unrelenting pursuit of justice for Ashley Oakland reached a significant milestone.
A real estate agent is murdered in broad daylight and the case goes cold. But now, more than a decade later, a major breakthrough.
Today is a day my family has thought about very often over the last 14 years.
A suspect is now in custody, a woman who seemingly lived the normal life of a housewife and mom for years, now charged in connection to this killing.
No one should ever get away with murder. Families deserve answers, and there needs to be justice for every victim.
What is the evidence that links this woman to the mysterious death as prosecutors piece together a lengthy, complicated puzzle and the defendant fights for her freedom? We're on The Case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Hey guys, real quick, there are a lot of products out there that claim to help you look your best, but it's hard to know whether they stand up and whether they have the right ingredients. I want to talk about our sponsor, Van Man. I've been using Van Man's Pearl Eye Cream. It's making a world of difference in keeping me fresh. Van Man's Pearl Eye Cream combines tallow with wild-caught pearl powder, one of the most nutrient-rich ingredients on earth for skin and eye health. And they've added super potent royal jelly, organic green tea, and some of the finest anti-aging essential oils like frankincense and rose, ingredients you can actually pronounce. I love how good my skin's been looking after using it. So give your eyes the care they deserve. Go to vanman.shop/OTC and use code OTC for 15% off your first order. Van Man, real ingredients, no exceptions. If you've ever bought a home, an open house is pretty routine. You go and check out a house on the market and the seller's agent may be there to keep an eye on things. In 2011, it was at one of those open houses where this murder mystery began. 27-year-old Ashley Oakland was described in her obituary as a transplanted country girl at heart, living alongside her husband and their puppy in the city of West Des Moines, Iowa. She enjoyed spending time with her family, friends, traveling, concerts, golfing, and she was involved in a number of charities and organizations. But her biggest passion at that time was a blooming real estate career. And shockingly, it is that dream that ultimately led to her death just a few years later, a murder that stayed a mystery for years, perhaps until now. Now, when you hear about who Ashley was, you just wonder who would want to take the life of a beautiful, ambitious young woman who appeared to be well respected by everyone who was around her. According to prosecutors, this is that woman, a suspect, 53-year-old Kristen Ramsey, an Iowa wife and mom, someone who her friends would claim would never do something like what she is accused of. But the big question at this point is, has this woman been living a dark, dark secret ever since 2011? Now, Kristen Ramsey was arrested last month and she was charged with Oakland's murder. But how did police decide that now is the time, roughly 15 years later, to put Ramsey under arrest? And what's the latest in this cold case as it is thawing now in the public eye? So we'll get into those hard-hitting facts here in just a moment, including how the defendant is trying to get released on bond, even though she is charged with murder. Before we get to all of that and what's playing out and a very unique approach the defense appears to be taking on that front, I want to talk about the very beginning and what we know about the evidence at this point. So we're going to go back to April 8th, 2011. Ashley Oakland is working for Iowa Realty. She's a real estate agent there, and she's assigned to work an open house at a model townhome in West Des Moines, Iowa. It was going to run from 1 to 6 that day. Pretty typical in her line of work. And according to prosecutors, Oakland sent an email shortly before 2 p.m. that day from her computer to a friend, and they were just talking about unrelated social plans. But that email shows us that around that time, nothing seemed to be off. Everything seemed to be going well. The email shows that she wasn't in distress. She was alive, and she was present at this townhome. So the open house is about an hour in, and prosecutors believe that it was business as usual until that point, because then something allegedly happens. Here is how prosecutors describe their version of events in a recent court filing. On the same date and time, a witness and her mother were present in the townhome that shared a wall with the model home. Shortly after 2 p.m., the witness, heard two loud noises coming from the model home that were described as thuds. And they were 3 to 4 seconds apart. And as described, the noises are believed by investigators to be gunshots. The filing includes that law enforcement recovered 2 fired .380 caliber cartridge cases from the scene consistent with being fired from a gun. And now here's where the defendant, Kristen Ramsey, comes into play according to prosecutors. They say that the model home was owned by the development agency called Rotland Homes, and that is where Ramsey worked as a sales manager. So knowing that, kind of you understand why Ramsey might have been at the same location as Ashley Oakland that day for the open house. So let's get back to what prosecutors are saying here. After hearing the noises, the witness observed the defendant outside the front door of the model home. Shortly after that, the witness observed the defendant from the second floor window of her home pacing by her vehicle on her cell phone. The call made on the defendant's phone was made to a fellow employee of Rotland Homes and was confirmed to have occurred within 2 minutes of the loud noises heard by the witness. The witness then observed the defendant back up at a high rate of speed in an erratic manner and leave the area. So this witness allegedly saw the defendant outside the front door of the model home pacing by her vehicle, making a call to a fellow employee minutes after these alleged gunshots went off inside the home and then erratically driving away. Now remember, this is merely a witness account. That's it. It certainly, though, does raise some eyebrows if prosecutors can prove that it's true. The big question, though, is what other evidence do they have? Now, according to the filing, this person who's a witness, they're very concerned after they say they saw all of this play out, this woman driving away at a high rate of speed. And so the witness goes into the model home, and that's when they make a terrible discovery. They find Ashley Oakland unresponsive on the ground. That witness then calls 911. Medical personnel respond, and then the defendant allegedly returns to the area of that townhome shortly after. So according to the autopsy from the Polk County Medical Examiner in Iowa, Oakland's cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds, and her manner of death was homicide. It was determined that she was shot at close range, once in the chest and once in the face. Now, you might be wondering when you hear all of this, because there is a witness, and then you have this witness saying that Ramsey was allegedly nearby. Who else was there? Were there any other people at this open house when this allegedly happened? Well, this is what's asserted in the filing by prosecutors. No other person was observed in the immediate area that was associated with the model home where Oakland was shot. All doors and windows in the living area of the townhome were confirmed locked or latched. There was no furniture or other item in the model home where Miss Oakland was found that corresponded to the thuds described by the witness, meaning no overturned furniture, broken glass, or any other damage. There were no signs of any struggle. So if this is true, you then have to wonder if the alleged killer, whoever they are, did they use the fact that Ashley Oakland, this real estate agent, she was alone. She was in this model home for the open house, and that was the opportunity that this alleged killer used to carry out the crime. And the fact that everything else inside this home, it appeared to be intact, that might indicate that this wasn't a robbery or some sort of home invasion. Obviously, at this point, that's merely speculation because a motive in this case, it has yet to be revealed. It's unclear if law enforcement have a motive in this case. Now, when Ramsey was arrested in March of this year, roughly 15 years after Ashley Oakland was found dead, and we saw pictures of Kristen Ramsey, it seemed like her arrest, to at least the people who knew her, came completely out of the blue because it appears that she lived a very normal life. She and her husband raised a child who went off to college. They go to football games. But then you hear this, and it may not be as big a surprise as it may seem. Because here's an interesting detail. Prosecutors said that Ramsey is not a new suspect in this case. In fact, she was allegedly interviewed multiple times throughout the investigation, but she allegedly provided conflicting versions of her whereabouts and other events occurring on the day of the incident, according to authorities. Now, prosecutors said that Ramsey's statements also conflicted with accounts from other witnesses. So that in and of itself, it's a red flag for prosecutors. But it is going to take more than that, more than words, to put together a solid case to put her away for allegedly killing Ashley Oakland. So let's go back to 2011, and a little more than a month after Ashley's death, we go to May 11th. And that's when a search warrant was executed at Ramsey's home. And according to prosecutors, law enforcement discovered several items of concern, including multiple firearms, illegal substances, and posters threatening violence. Now, we haven't seen pictures of what those posters look like, but it certainly is a major contrast from the images that have been presented by the defense of Kristen Ramsey and what life looked like for her over the past 15 years. Now, we'll get into more about how the defense is trying to paint Kristen Ramsey here in just a moment. And here's something striking as well. A second search warrant on the defendant's home was executed just last month. So we're talking 15 years later in 2026. And according to authorities, items of identical nature were also recovered. So it's unclear how specific items are potentially connected to Oakland's murder. There's a lot of questions unanswered at this point, a lot of questions about motive and connection. What really put Kristen Ramsey in the eyes of law enforcement as a suspect beyond stories that didn't seem to add up and accounts that put her close to where Ashley Oakland was murdered. But specifically, the rest of the information has yet to be released. And the fact that these search warrants are mentioned in the filing that prosecutors presented to the court, it shows that they potentially plan to bring all of this up during their case. So let's fast forward now. March 17th, 2026, a grand jury indicts Kristen Ramsey on first-degree murder, roughly 15 years after Ashley Oakland was killed, and Ramsey is taken into custody.
Since her death on April 8th of 2011, the search for answers has weighed heavily on family, friends, co-workers, and our central Iowa community. In addition, Ashley's story has haunted a very frightened community of professional realtors who have forever changed how they hold open houses and conduct business on a daily basis. Some of you, represented here today by the media, who have followed the case throughout the years or were at the homicide scene back in 2011, have shared that you too were affected by the details of Ashley's homicide on a personal level, more so than most cases that you've covered throughout the years. As for our investigative team, who has kept Ashley's case open these past 15 years, following up on thousands of leads from the public and reviewing countless items of evidence, materials collected throughout the investigations, Ashley's story has kept many of us awake at night, revisiting the details over and over in our minds, searching for that missing piece that would tie everything together and lead us down the right path to identifying a person that was responsible for this act. The drive and unwavering commitment by investigators to solve this case is always and has been justice for Ashley and her family. Yesterday, March 17th, 2026, West Des Moines police detectives arrested 53-year-old Kristen Ramsey without incident. She is currently being held at the Dallas County Jail. She has been indicted by the Dallas County Grand Jury for the offense of murder in the first degree. At this time, no other arrests are anticipated. As significant as this arrest is, our work is not done yet. This case will now move to criminal prosecution.
I want everyone to know that the Dallas County Attorney's Office is committed to seeking justice for Ashley Oakland, her family, and all victims of crime in Dallas County. I will personally be prosecuting this case with the help of Assistant Attorney General Scott Brown and Assistant County Attorney Andrea Lovick. As this is an open case, we cannot discuss the details of our prosecution. What I can tell you is that after hearing the evidence, a Dallas County grand jury issued a true bill indicting Kristen Ramsey with the murder of Ashley Oakland. Under our system of justice, the defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Ramsey was booked into the Dallas County Jail on a $2 million cash-only bond, which is a ruling that's been an ongoing area of debate in this case. According to court documents cited by KCCI, Ramsey requested a bond reduction to $100,000 with the option to post 10% of it for her release. Now, as part of those conditions, Ramsey said that she would agree to GPS monitoring, a curfew, pretrial supervision, and surrendering her passport, in addition to the supervision of a third-party custodian if the court deemed additional requirements necessary. Now, the state is saying, no way. They filed their own opposition to the request, and we'll get into both sides of this argument here in a moment. But let's get into this emotional hearing that just went down on April 10th, where we got a good look at Kristen Ramsey and heard how her defense team is trying to present her to the public, not as a monster who allegedly hid murder for years, but as a kind-hearted member of the community that would not be capable of a crime like what she's now accused of. We saw Ramsey, though. She was in tears. She was also in chains as she entered her plea on the first-degree murder charge.
The defendant filed a written arraignment, which the court has reviewed, and I will enter a not guilty plea as set forth in the written arraignment in the record.
During this hearing, the court also heard arguments on two matters, one of them being a search warrant on the defendant's cell phone requested by the state.
With regard to Ms. Ramsey's phone, all her private information would go to the government without any of the protected order. So all we're saying is, I think we can work out an agreement with them where if they wanted to, we could say, okay, this is excluded. But we would want our expert there watching that download to make sure that private information is excluded. Clearly, they have a right to some of the information, and that might be on it, may be relevant to them. I think they're entitled to get it. But a private protected information under the protected area that is statutory in Iowa, they are not entitled to have it without a specific request to you.
If we were to go through the cell phone and find something that wasn't in the parameters that the court signed in the search warrant, we would be required to come back to the court with another search warrant to search for the items that are relevant. If something is privileged, then the court will make that determination after the fact through a motion to suppress, saying that the state's not allowed to use that evidence. And that there is no case law, there is no rules in criminal procedure that allow for the court to put boundaries after the search warrant has been signed. And so, in this case, Your Honor, we're asking the court to allow us to execute the search warrant and any future search warrant that we may ask for in the future, to allow us to do the investigation that we are allowed to do under the law.
We're happy to give him everything he's entitled to. We just don't want to give him our client's medical records, or conversation with her spouse, her conversation with, if it's a priest or minister. They're not entitled to get it. Now, there may be certain circumstances that they could get this under, but not on some general warrants that we're going to go on a search of her cell phone. I wouldn't want people to have my cell phone because it has every medical record I've ever had on it. And that's the same thing that Ms. Ramsey is entitled to protect. So I think it's an easy solution, Your Honor. That's all I would say.
Now, you might be able to understand why prosecutors would want to explore data from Ramsey's cell phone. Call logs, text messages, GPS data, and other digital footprints could become crucial pieces of evidence in this case if something were to come up. You also have to think, though, how much technology has changed, especially when it comes to cell phones back in 2011. But also, what's considered private protected information, as argued by the defense, could become a roadblock to getting evidence for the state in this particular instance. Now, the judge is expected to rule on the search warrant related to Ramsey's cell phone sometime this week, and we're going to keep a close eye on what happens there. The bulk of the hearing, though, it really focused on that argument surrounding Ramsey's request for a bond reduction so she could go home as this case plays out. And the defense even put 3 witnesses on the stand to testify about Ramsey's alleged good character.
She was a sweet person from day one, 6th grade. Very good, caring, compassionate, selfless person. She would do anything for anyone.
Do you think that Chrissy poses any reasonable danger to the community?
No.
Based on the characteristics and the values that you saw Chrissy develop and exhibit through middle school, junior high, and high school, do you feel that she would in any way flee or not show up for her required court appearances?
No.
Okay. If the court were to grant our request and reduce her bond, do you believe, or would you have any reservations about Chrissy returning to your town, into the neighborhood where you lived for 18 years?
The best way to answer that is my grandchildren grew up in my son and daughter-in-law's house, and their babysitters were I and my wife. And as two educators, you don't get by with much. And if I knew something was going on in that home, she would not have been allowed to be there. I would have gone to my son and his wife, and they would have said no.
Okay. Do you believe, based on your experiences and your observations of Chrissy over the last 18 years, that she poses a risk of harm to your community?
I'd have to say she's the last person in that town that I would think would be involved.
Okay. How would you describe Chrissy's character?
She's the most loving person that I know. She's caring. She's compassionate. She's considerate.
Did she have any enemies growing up?
No.
Did she ever have a rebellious streak growing up?
No.
One of the requests we made to the court was to potentially appoint a custodian for Chrissy if she were to be released on bond in the community. Would you be willing to serve as a custodian?
Yes.
Which would mean if Chrissy violates the terms and conditions, you would have to report that to the court. Would you be willing to do that?
Yes.
And if necessary, could Chrissy live with you if that were necessary? Okay. Based on you knowing Chrissy her whole life, do you have any reasons or concerns that Chrissy could pose harm to the community if she were released?
No.
Do you think she would flee if
No.
she were released? I know one concern that the state raised in its resistance was she may harm herself. And I feel like you would be in the best position to discuss that and allay those concerns. Would you tell the court, from your perspective, whether that's a legitimate concern?
No, she would never, ever, ever do that to Tanner. She would never leave him. No.
Okay. No other questions?
Now, after the witnesses finished their testimony, both sides gave their final arguments to the judge.
Ms. Ramsey lived here her whole life. Her family lives here. Her heart and soul resides in Woodward, Iowa. The trips that she's talked about, being out of state, not having a passport, having a strong familial connection, establishes that she's tied to this community. She has no criminal record, one speeding ticket. That is significant because not only does it show something about her life, but also her character. And you didn't hear one person come up and say, they've seen her with drugs, they've seen her with firearms, we found this bullet somewhere. Judge, we asked for a reasonable bond. That's all we're asking for, so she can prepare to defend herself and do it while she's out with a family who loves her and who she loves back. This is a unique case. It is a unique case. And we're asking you, Judge, to follow the evidence that was presented during the bond issue and give us a fair bond. That's all we want today. Thank you, Judge.
This is a Class A felony. The defendant is facing a life sentence without the possibility of parole if she is convicted. The nature of the charge in and of itself creates a situation where a defendant is more likely to flee. Once she understands the nature of the case against her, which includes the evidence in the, not only that was presented to the grand jury, and all the evidence, by the way, presented to the grand jury is part of the investigative file. But once she's faced with that, in our estimation, it makes her more likely to flee. It also potentially puts other persons in danger. Her life is different now. That changes any person's circumstances. She has had access to weapons in the past. There's no assurance the defense can give us that she will not continue to have access to weapons. There is a front-end timeline to this offense that occurred. It's 1:56 p.m. It has to do with an email that Ashley Oakland sent. It was unrelated to the homicide, other than she was making plans for that night. And then there's a 911 call that is made on the back end of it. That's a very tight timeline. Given that, in conjunction with the witness who observed Kristen Ramsey in the area, her statements that she made to police, which can only best be described as inconsistent, are such that the nature of this case, the circumstances of this case, demand a higher bond. And that's where we would ask that the court place that. It was set initially at $2 million cash only, and we would ask that it remain there.
Now the judge said that he would submit his decision in writing after considering the arguments in court, but did leave the attorneys with this on the record.
In making my determination, it's important the public know that a bond is not meant to punish somebody. The defendant is presumed innocent. On the flip side, there's been a finding of probable cause that the defendant committed a very serious crime.
I thought this was also interesting. The defense submitted a document to the court that in a lot of ways gives Ramsey's life story, with pictures painting her as a good-hearted person, living this normal life, someone who shouldn't be held in jail as this case moves forward. Now, we're still waiting on the judge's decision on the bond reduction, and we're going to keep a close eye on that as this case moves forward. Now, another issue of debate in this case involves evidence, which is understandable considering this case began roughly 15 years ago. There's a report from KCCI that references a defense motion that was filed just this week, alleging the prosecution informed them that law enforcement either lost or destroyed evidence, case information, or both since Miss Oakland's death, and that is a bombshell claim. According to the report, the defense requested sworn affidavits attesting to any of the evidence alleged to be destroyed, in addition to all of the state's discovery and investigative information in the case so far. So there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered here. We're going to be keeping a close eye as this legal process unfolds. But what we do know is that the next hearing, a status conference, is set for June 19th, 2026, and the parties agreed to set a trial date for January 11th, 2027. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and we are also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.